Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again on Real Estate Sips with Sandy and Shay. This is sip number 6.
Yay, six!
Shay is away on vacation, so today we have the beautiful, lovely, my friend Tina Mulligan from Cardinal Financial. She is sitting in for Shay, and if you remember, Tina was on the very first show. And say hello, Tina.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? Happy Monday.
Yes. I actually love Mondays. And we, God has to look like that Garfield look, like he hates Mondays. But this is Mr. Don Sarley of Advanced Research and Appraisal. He is, he is the owner of that company, Advanced Research and Appraisal. He's also a realtor and an appraiser for over 40 years. So between the two of them, we're almost at 100 years of expertise and knowledge. I feel like I am a baby. So I'm here to just soak up all the knowledge. So we're not going to chit-chat much. How was your weekend?
It was fabulous. I'm getting ready to go on vacation. Not that I take a vacation very often, but definitely going on vacation at the next week, as a matter of fact. But I got to tell y'all, I have known Don and I've been doing it for 40 years. We were just reminiscing back into the days when we sat on the same committee for the Florida Association of Mortgage Brokers. So if I tell you, we go back a long way. He's got a lot of information and certainly a lot of history on what's been happening in the real estate market and also in the crazy appraisal market that we're in right now too.
And it's so fitting that the two of you are on here today because during a transaction, the lender and appraisers, they work hand in hand. So let's just jump right into it, Don. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to get an appraisal? I know it seems like maybe a stupid question, but you know a whole lot more than I do.
It depends upon the intended use and the intended user. Often I'll be asked for appraisals from individuals saying, hey, I'm thinking of selling my home. I'm going to do it on my own. I'm not going to hire a professional, which I always encourage. Hire a professional, hire a realtor to do the job. And to clarify, most appraisers are realtors. Realtors, you don't have to have a real estate sales license. You can just have an appraisal license. I happen to have both. But what I can tell you is people will call me and I'll talk myself out of the appraisal because frankly, it's not always the best money spent. Because if you're not going, first of all, if you're going for financing, you can't originate the appraisal as a borrower. If you're using a standard lender, under both FIREA and federal rules and law and USPAP, the lender has to originate the appraisal. You have to be arm's length. In fact, Tina often cannot originate the appraisal. As the mortgage originator, she has to stay arm's length away from the appraiser, and there's going to be somebody in her organization that is either responsible for ordering the appraisals or they're going to have an appraisal facilitator or management firm handling that. It's changed a lot over years ago. When I first knew Tina, she could call me and she could hire me and engage me, but that's not the way it works. So if you hire me as an individual to do an appraisal, and it's realize no matter what I tell you, the lender's still going to get another appraisal. They're not even going to look at mine. They're not going to take it unless you're going to a private person who's loaning their own money and is not subject to federal regulations and federal rules. It's not the best money spent. You can get a good opinion from a knowledgeable realtor who knows their market just as for a lot less or maybe for free rather than pay me. And my fees are probably the most expensive in the industry because I don't want to work. But the fact is, you don't want to hire me because my fees are not, I'm not cheap to begin with. And it's not good money. It's not the best money spent. Now, if the intended use is for a loan and you're a lender, well, certainly you're going to either ask me to bid on an appraisal with a turn time and a fee, or you're going to offer me the appraisal assignment and I'm going to do it. And the exception to what I just said is commercial lending. Commercial lending is a totally different situation. Lenders can't order directly. It's not the same as the residential rules. They might take my appraisal. And again, as an appraiser, I've been doing it 42 years. I have my ASA designation for all property types. I'm an IFA, designated appraiser, which is an organization that merged with the ASA a few years ago also, and I'm an SRA with the Appraisal Institute. So there you have some of my basic credentials.
And
Wow.
some of the people that are, because as y'all know, I mean, I do a lot of mortgage financing. It's the only thing I do. However, I do see that there's a lot of cash buyers out there in the market. Would you ever recommend a cash buyer to get an appraisal before they just pay the cash for it? And those can actually call you
Well,
directly.
if they're a cash buyer and they're looking in the market, they're seeing what other things are selling for. And what we're seeing in the marketplace today, more often than not, is buyers that are making offers that are not necessarily realistic. They're saying, I'll pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000
40.
over appraised value
40,000.
because they want the property.
Mm-hmm.
They're engaged with the property and they know that the property has dynamics. Appraisers, when we give a value in a stable and stagnant market, that can be good. But we look over our shoulder. We're looking at history. The market's very dynamic. I'm gonna die from your show.
We're gonna do a sip right now, y'all.
Do not die on this show. See if you can. Do you need a pen?
I'm sorry, I have COPD. I will cough occasionally.
Okay. And we're all COVID free. So while Don is coughing, I want to say, Tina, so Don has so much information to give us, but basically in a nutshell, if there is a loan involved, the lender will order the appraisal. You as a buyer or a seller, well, let's focus on the buyer. You're not allowed to go out and find your own appraiser if there's a loan involved. So your lender will order the appraisal, and it may be someone like Don or somebody else, because it has to be arm's length, as he says.
Yeah, just to let you know, I mean, me in the fact of running a branch in Cardinal, I will tell you, we have a list of appraisers. We have 6 of them that we go into rotation. So once you go into rotation, then you know, we can't handpick appraisers, but we can handpick who goes into our rotation. And that's real important too, to make sure that whatever lender and financing that you have, that you actually have someone who can give you the names of the various appraisers that are in the rotation. A lot of people use management companies where they have zero control of who actually is doing the appraisal. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and it's in the industry a lot of realtors are concerned, borrowers get afraid of it, but there seems to be a very bad taste in the FHA appraisals. Realtors won't even necessarily, in today's very fast-paced market, won't even give an FHA buyer an opportunity because of, and they always lean back to the appraisal. Is there really that much significant difference? Because I know you do both. Is there really that much of a significant difference between that FHA appraisal and the conventional?
Actually, I don't do many FHA appraisals today because I just don't, my fees are a lot higher than a lot of my competitors. But I can tell you that the big difference in FHA is if your home is built before 1976. And again, I spent 20 years as the head manager down here managing the FHA foreclosures throughout South Florida. The problem is if you got peeling paint on the exterior of the home up to 5 feet above the ground, that's the defective paint surfaces have to be scraped, sealed, and typically repainted. Doesn't have to match, but it has to be treated.
Sure.
The big difference is FHA, like conventional lending, is going to be concerned with safety issues. If the appraiser does their job, and appraisers aren't inspectors, they're visitors. They visit a property. But for FHA, they have to do a little bit more. They have to do a head and shoulders examination of the attic areas, take photographs. They have to report the peeling paint. They have to make sure that the property has acceptable flooring. Concrete, even finished concrete surfaces are not an acceptable flooring for FHA. In most of the country, you have to have heat. South Florida is an exception. Hawaii is an exception. You don't need to have heat. But they're supposed to verify that. And they're supposed to comment on those value conditions. Years ago, there were more conditions, but today it's almost the same appraisal.
That's what I wanted everybody to know. They're about the same appraisals.
Well, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. On the realtor side, you guys are saying they're both the same appraisals, but the numbers aren't telling that story. We so often see the same property that has had an FHA appraisal, the contract may have fallen through, and we have to go back to the drawing table, and then a conventional appraisal is done on it from a different appraiser, and then the value is higher. So
It has to do with the data they're analyzing in the appraiser. A value is a value. My opinion of value is going to be the same whether I'm doing a conventional or an FHA appraisal. I might have a different opinion of value than another appraiser. Also, you may have sold the property conventionally after the fact for more money, or maybe this market today where it's rising. And typically, an appraiser that's doing an assignment is going to look at your sales price and think, hey, there's a meeting of the minds. That's probably a good indication of, assuming there's no fraud or any craziness, and there isn't most of the time.
Right.
Probably a good indication of value. Appraisers put one number on the valuation, but values actually fall in ranges. A property could be worth anywhere between 400 and 410. I can tell you, I personally just sold a home FHA, okay? And I had to educate my seller and say, hey, we're gonna have to take care of this peeling paint and put the carpet in.
yes,
And the only other thing is, the appraiser also noted that one of the ground fault interrupt connectors in the kitchen wasn't properly functioning, so we had to replace an outlet. A $15 item with a $15 repair. We got the appraisal. Buyer was willing to pay $10,000 over, even buying FHA, but we didn't need that because it did appraise. And frankly, we're doing those two things. Now we're just waiting for the 4-point inspection and for the seller to find a place to live, to rent, which is a very difficult challenge today too.
Yes, it is.
And then we close, and it's really
So
that simple.
at the forefront of the appraisal news, this is an ongoing discussion since we're talking about value. What do you advise sellers who are being undervalued, and I'm going to say specifically minorities, whose properties are being undervalued by appraisers who are of a different, I should say, persuasion, that are undervaluing the property when the comps are clearly there. And I've read in the news.
Well, the news has actually was overhyped. I'm going to tell you that to begin with.
About
Appraisers are not going to necessarily be biased. You're not going to have that. A lot of the problems where folks have claimed that they were undervalued have actually, the studies have shown and the cases have shown that that's not always been the case. Now, I'm not going to say there's not discrimination, because there is.
Absolutely.
But appraisers typically are not going to discriminate. They're going to look at properties in the neighborhood. What discriminates and what can affect value is what are the other homes in that neighborhood selling for. And if you say, well, hey, here's the same home in a different neighborhood, it's selling for so much more. And let's say one is an Anglo neighborhood and one is a black neighborhood. It doesn't really matter who the buyers are, who the owners. You're going to have to stay within the neighborhood boundaries. And I don't really believe there's been deliberate valuation errors with reference to the situation that we saw in the Indianapolis article and the San Francisco article. I'm aware of those, but I'm also aware of the Appraisal Institute and what came out of Congress, which is that it has not borne out. News people will overhype things for news sometimes. But there's always a chance that somebody's going to bring their own biases in.
Right. Absolutely. Because it's an ongoing issue that there are biases. We're humans, you know.
But if you feel you're undervalued, regardless of the reason, you have a few options.
That's what I want you to check.
That is, you can always resell the property to somebody else.
Mhm.
Talk to your lender about getting another appraisal, point out the reasons with valid data and valid information on why they should reconsider that appraisal. They can go back to the original appraiser and ask for a reconsideration of value. However,
boy.
realistically, it doesn't happen
Not
very
really.
often anymore.
Mm-mm.
There's, in most cases, used to be when they had an FHA appraisal panel, you could go to FHA and HUD down in Coral Gables, and you could make the appraisers take a look and answer all your questions. Used to be lenders, you could go to the reconsideration route. But I can tell you, I had a bad appraisal on a property, done for an appraiser that was selling. I handled in Hollywood. Years ago, the appraisal came, he didn't properly analyze, didn't have the right information. I went to the lender, and what ended up happening is we resold the property for $20,000 more to somebody else. That lender, now who will remain nameless, but a very large lending company, they just didn't want the aggravation. They decided, we're not gonna get another appraisal, we're not gonna proceed with this loan. And that's more often than not. Tina, is that what you see?
Well, I will tell you, I have not seen that kind of discrepancy when it comes to the appraisals of recent, because the market's moving so darn fast.
Yeah.
I would say back in the day, was there an appeals aspect of it? Yes. But very seldom am I running into, and I think it's because, you know, there are some really good appraisals out there and appraisers, but I just haven't run into something that's so blatantly not being represented properly. But is there, and this is a question to you, is there some place, like if you feel that you've been discriminated against, a lot of people won't go back to the lender because it really wasn't the lender who did the job on the appraisal. Is there like an appraisal board people can, not only just the lender if they want to, is there somewhere they can
Realistically,
go?
there is a state appraisal board that makes appraisers follow the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, and has some really good people on it. I think Armando Del Valle out of Miami is currently the chair.
Mhm.
And he was my vice president when I was president of the Appraisal Institute. He's a really good guy. You got former chairs, Frank Gregor, and I know most of the people over the years on the state board. I will tell you, you can make a complaint to the state board. You can do that anonymously. You can do that with proper information. However, it's the state, it's government. How fast does government move? Not very. Will you get an acceptable answer quickly? No. Are there a lot of cases where appraisers are deliberately valuing properties low nationwide? I know of no cases.
Yeah, I don't know.
And are there situations where appraisers have overvalued property or had the finger pointed at them for overvaluing? Yes, and I do know of cases with reference to that. Perhaps there are a few cases, but appraisers, the problem is an appraiser isn't necessarily a real estate salesperson. They don't have the empathy, they don't have the experience. They're supposed to understand what buyers and sellers want, but they don't always. And they get paid regardless of what your appraisal comes in. So they're gonna get paid and get on to the next deal. And that $500 or $600 or $450, whatever you're paying them for your standard appraisal, they don't really care. And they don't wanna take the time to reevaluate it. The exception to that rule I'm challenging today is VA. If you have a VA loan, and you do VA loan?
Yes,
It's enough
absolutely.
VA.
Okay, you can go
We
to
love
same,
our
My
VAs.
veterans.
if you're a
Thanks
VA,
for serving.
if you're a VA, if you have a VA appraiser that comes from the VA panel, and I'm not a VA appraiser, but St. Petersburg loves their vets. And if you have an issue, you can go to St. Petersburg on your VA appraisal, point out the issue, and they will go back to their panel appraiser and make him answer the questions and follow appropriate procedures and make changes when they're relevant. Now, are they gonna penalize the appraiser for making those changes? No, they're actually gonna say thank you for taking another look, for reevaluating your opinion.
Yeah.
And that is one thing, I'm sorry, that's one thing I want you guys to know when it comes to VA. All lenders, especially me, we have our own rotation of appraisers. So some of the pitfalls that people run into is when a lender or a mortgage broker has no control over what appraisers are being used in their rotation. They have to go through a management company and it's like, you know, half a dozen of one thing or another. But going back to the VA is one thing we do not pick. VA actually picks the panel of appraisers themselves. However, if a VA appraisal does not come back in value according to a purchase contract, they do have what they call Tidewater, which gives you about 48 hours to address the comps, and if they use the right comps to bring it back in. And I will tell you, it used to be whatever a VA said, it was the gospel according to Luke, and you could never change anything. So with the Tidewater, it gives you just a little bit more of a window of opportunity to address any